All right, everyone. Welcome to our noon session, the presentation and the demo. Our session lead is the Robin Wenstrom. Robin is the technical specialist, security, compliance, and identity from Microsoft. Robin has about a decade of consulting experience and working in various countries across his career. Robin holds multiple Microsoft certifications and a Microsoft certified trainer who loves sharing his knowledge with others. And Robin will do a demonstration about Microsoft Entra identity governance with lifecycle workflows for today's session. All right, so I will stop my sharing, give the control to Robin. All right, so Robin, all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Brian. So what I will do here today, first I'm gonna make sure I move stuff around so it doesn't cover my screen. But what we have something we call here at Microsoft is called Microsoft Entra, and it's a very common misunderstanding that Microsoft Entra is Azure Active Directory, or it is simply permission management and verified ID. What Microsoft Entra really is actually something that we have taken a couple of products within the Azure directory and combined them into one package to make it a little bit easier to manage. So we have Azure Active Directory, we have permission management and verified ID. Now within Azure Active Directory, we're going to look at something we call in the identity governance here, we have a new feature called Lifecycle workflows, as well as we have privileged identity management, but that's for another time. With the lifecycle workflow, we're actually going to make it much easier for, well, HR and IT, and in general, every new starter and helping out manager for the new starter to make their life much easier with how they onboard their user here. So as you can see, I already have some stuff here created in the background in my window here. Now, we will go over that, but before that, I'm going to jump over to my manual HR system because I don't have a system installed in my environment. So as we can see here, I'm at the Microsoft Graph and I've set up everything here. So we should have a new starter starting with us. We have Luke Skywalker. He's a very persuasive salesperson and he's going to be based on Dagobah. So he's a remote worker. So it's even better that this is automated. We can see we have him, his start date is today, as well as we're giving him an email address, as well as we have a very secret super password here that is really we don't care about because we're going to reset that anyway. So first off, we're going to create this user. By clicking here, we see if we have created. This is what happens in the background with the HR system. So if you have SAP, for example, or if you have Workday or anything else, you can incorporate this with APIs or even directly with the documentation we have available on Microsoft, learn.microsoft.com. So here we see now, again, our user, Luke here, is being created. Our HR system, me, in this case, have reported in saying we have a new user here. So, and with that, with the new user, we also want to make sure we have a new manager to them. So we're going to take this ID, which is the user, and I'm going to jump over to the next tab, which here we see we have a little bit different here. We see we have Megan B, her manager ID, which will be coming a little bit here in a second and be important. And then we're going to paste the user ID here. Now it will give you a possible error, so we can ignore that because it's a false positive. Now with this, what it does, this is actually using the Microsoft Graph API and talking to my Azure Active Directory and saying, I want to make sure that Megan here is Luke's new manager. So I'm going to run this query. And of course, I am having some issues here. Let me give it a try again. You see he is I'm going to go back here and double check. So this is what happens when you try to demo things and everything runs well when you try it. So we're going to see if Luke here is created properly. Yes, he is. And what we have done here, we see he doesn't have any group memberships. That is correct. He shouldn't have. He's just a member. And his account is disabled. That is also correct. And I'm just going to grab his object ID here, which we're going to use, and see if this is, I see here why we have a citation mark too much. So there we go. No content created. That is correct, because we want to have this as a verification saying this is correct now, it's working. And here in a little bit, we should be able to update and see that he has a manager. Now, let me see. I usually do this in the other portal, so let me bring that up. I try to keep it all in one portal just to make it much easier. So I'm going to bring up Luke here, and I'm going to zoom in here in a little bit. Here we go. So again, we see the sign in is blocked. He doesn't have any logins. He doesn't have any groups. That is correct. He doesn't have any licenses on him, and that is also correct. And we can see here, Megan has been assigned as manager. And that is also correct, because that's what we just did here. Now, what I want to do, I'm going to say go back here to the lifecycle workflow. And we have a workflow here that runs every 3 hours. Once you configure it, it can run automatically without problems. Now, I have a schedule enabled here with various workflows, and you can actually go in and add additional one. So I have one here called Demo Onboard Pre-Hire Employee. So now if I go into that, we can see more information on it. So we can even run it on demand, which we will do here in a little bit. And we see we have the workflow name, we have the description of it. So it says here, pre-configured task for an onboarding employee. In our case, it is a joiner category. We have 2 different, and we have a third one coming called mover. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. As well as we see the next run target run here, which means how often will it run. So we can see we can either wait to 12:39 p.m. I do not recommend that. And we can see how many users it's been processing. So if your HR system is reporting in saying, hey, we have 5 new starters, it will automatically include these people in here. As well as we can see if there's any errors, if we have any failures with it for some reason, as well, and then the amount of tasks we have. Now, if I go to the task menu, you can see there are 4 different tasks here that we have set up. So we have enable user, which is correct because Luke is currently disabled, so he cannot access anything. We want him to add him to various types of groups. And we want to send him a welcome email, as well as generate a tab, a temporary access password. Hence, the password we saw in the graph is irrelevant. We don't need it and it will not work. And then it will send an email to your manager who will go in and say, hey, I have a new starter here. Now, if I go in on task before we run everything, I can actually see here all the tasks that are possible to add here. So we have add user to group, and we see it's based on the joiner and leaver. I can disable the account. So whenever I have someone leave the company for some reason, I can disable the user account automatically, remove them from the groups, and say even the selected teams they have. So if you have Microsoft Team in your environment, you can remove and add all the users that you need there, as well as you have the possibility to run custom tasks. Now, what custom tasks means is that you can actually run Power Automate flows or PowerShell flows, or very similar there. In this case, it's based on a logic app, so Power Automate. So if you create a flow there and incorporate different APIs or different scripts that you want to run, you can actually do a lot more than what you see here. So generally, your imagination is your limit there, and some technical specifications, but that is depending on the logic app as well. Now I will not do any extra custom here because I don't have anything pre-configured, unfortunately. It's on my backlog. But what I can do here, we can look at, we want to add him to various groups. So we see here, we create a task. We say, I want to add him to groups with licenses. So in this case, I'm going to leave the description as is. And then you see here, we have select group. I can actually go in and see what groups I have. So in my case, I have a licensing group that is dynamic. So every time I assign a user, they will be assigned the E5 license. As well as I want to make sure that Luke, our salesperson, is also involved in the sales and marketing group and the sales and marketing mail group here. So he gets access to everything. And then if I want, I can actually add him to other groups as well. So say, I want to make sure he's part of the Contosa marketing here. So he gain access to a little bit more there. And I want to make sure that he is part of the Mark 8 project team because I believe he's going to be useful there. And you see, I have a bunch of other groups that I could use and add, but I'm quite happy with these choices right now. So I'm going to select those. And then you have the possibility to say, continue the workflow execution on an error. So if something happens, you can actually have it continue. So it doesn't stop the whole process of doing everything that you tell it to. As well as we want to make sure that it's enabled so it will actually run in our environment here. So I can go in and disable it if I want to. But in my case, I will not. So I'm going to save my settings here. So it's updating my workflow. And now we're going to go back here one step. And let's see, go to workflow. And like I mentioned, we can run it on demand. And we see we also have a pre-offboard of an employee. But in my case, we're going to use the pre-on hire. So we're going to run it on demand. And with this, you actually get to select users because this is something I am manually triggering. So I know I have Luke here, so I'm going to search for him. We see we have Luke Skywalker, perfect. So I'm going to select him. And then I'm going to say run workflow. Now, if I want a reminder, I can actually go to the workflow task and look at him to see what it will do. So in my case, I'm just going to run workflow. You get the information here saying that it's running on demand, the processing is started. And we see here in the list, we actually have Luke Skywalker with a user ID, a start date, which is our triggering, and we're going to look at that here in a second. Now you see the user are processed, they are successful. We have 4 tasks that we're running. And if I click on runs, you get some more information here. So we see we have, it's currently in progress. It hasn't failed any tasks. So if I refresh that, we can actually go in here and click on it and see we have, it went even quicker. So it hasn't updated properly in the side here, but we can go in and see we have enabled account. We have added him to users, to groups with the licenses. We have sent a welcome email and we've generated a tap email with a information email to the manager. And that is exactly what we wanted from the HR perspective. So HR is just leaning back, drinking some coffee or tea and saying, hey, we've done our job. We didn't have to go to IT, have them create a ticket, or even we create a ticket for IT, and they don't have to go in and do the user access management there. So they don't have to go in and manually create the user, set a password, assign the various groups they need. Instead, we have the lifecycle workflow do this automatically for us, which is much easier. So in our case, we're going to move over here to Luke. We're going to refresh. And we see now it doesn't say sign in blocked. We see he has the groups of dynamic E5 licensing. His Mark 8 project team, as we saw, is added. He doesn't have any administrative roles, which is perfect. We see, as well as if I scroll up and I go in on licenses, I can verify that the US location is correct, that it was something that we had our HR system specify, as well as he got the E5 licenses here. So far, everything looks good on my end. And if I now jump over to, let me see, I didn't have that open, did I? So let me open up here the guest as I go to office.com. And I'm gonna sign in. We're gonna do the Megan the at incognito.com. And let's see if that, yep, perfect. Of course, as any good organization, we have a multi-factor authentication on. So I'm gonna make sure I can log in here. I type in the code that is requested. Now it will ask me to fill in some more information. And this is per design. In my demo environment, I'm just gonna skip the setup because I do not want to add a phone number. So we're gonna log in and we're gonna open Outlook. Again, it will ask me for the phone number because that is a requirement we have set, but we're gonna skip this. And now we see here, we got an email at 9:13 a.m., which is quite accurate though. So we can actually see here, we have an email saying, hey, we have a new person that will join in your team, and it is from Microsoft Azure on behalf of Contoso, which is correct. And we have Luke Skywalker. He was joining today, Thursday, 25th at 0000, and that is because we didn't specify a time frame specifically. We only said a day. And that is absolutely correct because you can actually be even more specific than that. And we have the temporary access password here. So this is giving us a much easier way for the manager to print this out and give it to Luke and say, here's your password or passcode. Now log into your user profile, change the password accordingly, and you're ready to go. We have provisioned you everything else that you need. Now let's have a quick look at what the workflows are and how we actually set them up properly, because we understand the lifecycle workflow here. So we have a couple of things here. So we can actually create a workflow and we can see how many we have and if they're scheduled, if they're disabled for some reason. And now if I click on create workflow, it will give you a template here. So it's very easy to get started with. So you have the onboard pre-hire, you have the onboard hire employee or post onboarding, even if there's some things there that you want to add in going further on, as well as you have the real-time employee termination, the offboarding of an employee, and post offboarding. So in my case, I'm just going to do it very simple. I'm going to say select an onboarding pre-hire. I can go in and give it a name and say, so I'm just going to leave this as a default currently. But here you also have a trigger scope. The trigger type that is how we make sure that the HR system is reporting in and how we trigger this flow. So if you're familiar with Power Flow in general, this will be very familiar with. So in our case, we see we have days from the event. So we can save 3 days from the event before the employee hire date. So if you remember, we had an employee hire date of today for Luke. So if we had waited 7 days or 3 days in this example, this flow would have been triggered. So if I click on the next here, configure scope, I can actually go in and change and say that I can add different rules to say, I want to make sure that he's part of, say, a country, and it's equal to USA in this case. Or I say I can add another, say, rule here, say, and he's also part of the department, and I can say it's equal to sales. So if these two expressions, these rules are fulfilled, then we will trigger this workflow. And I can go into review tasks here again, as you're familiar with. We did this earlier. So we say we have generate tab and send an email. And this is, you can go in here and give it some more information. So in our case, we see here manager attribute on the user profile, and we can also CC people. So if you have, say, a team leader, or if you have a department leader, as well as we have the temporary access tab settings. So you can decide on how long you want this password to be active. the access password. And then you can say it's one-time use, and again, you can continue the workflow if you want to make sure that it's getting an error for some reason. As well as you can even go in further here and change everything in the email that you see. Now, so here you have in the section, you can customize the text with a little bit of configuration here, as well as you can even set up so you have it on a language that is based on the country they're living in. So you can, with the automated and some machine learning and AI here in the background, it can translate this to the desired language as well. So I'm just going to leave it as is because we don't need to add additional here, some additional tasks. But then you have if you're familiar with M365, you have the summary that gives you some idea on everything that you have configured, and then if you want to enable it or not. So in my case, I'm going to say, I'm going to enable the schedule, and I'm going to click create. Now in here, you can see I have the 3 different workflows that I created before. One is the demo that we just run, and one is the onboard pre-hire that we just created, as well as the offboarding. So I can go in here and check on it as well to see, hey, what is this? Do I want to enable this? What tasks do I have enabled here? So in our case, we say disable user account, we remove them, all the users from all groups, remove them from the teams, and licenses. So let's actually give that a try, shall we? So if I do run on demand here, I'm going to, again, select the user. And this is, I'd like to emphasize, this is actually automated when it really happens. It's just we don't want to wait all this time. So now we know it's running here, so we can refresh. We can see it's running on Luke. Let's see what it says here. We have disabled user account is in progress. The other ones are in queue. Now, I imagine it may be a little bit tricky on, I see it worked as well. So remove all the users from groups, disable user account, remove all the teams, remove all the licenses. Let's see if it will do that as well. So we're updating that again. It seems to be successful. There we go. So now let's have a look at that. So I'm going to jump over here to Luke again. And we see Luke is still here. So if I open him, could be a little bit slow here. There we go. Again, his sign in is blocked. We don't see any groups that is assigned to him, so they have all been removed properly. He still has his manager, that is correct. We don't want to remove that. And if I scroll up here and I look at the licenses, this should be removed here in a little bit. It is dynamic, so it takes a little bit for it to actually update that. But at least he is disabled, so he cannot log in. So we don't have to worry about Luke going in and messing with us, our environment, if he would leave the company. That's generally how easy it is to, with Lifecycle workflow, go in and set up everything for a user and have it much easier for the IT department and HR to focus on a little bit more important things here. And the last thing I wanted to show here is you can actually customize how often the workflow is running. So I can go up to 24 hours and even down to 1 hour. So in my case, I want to say I do like to have it every 3 hours, as well as I can change the email domain here. So I can say it's coming from Lifecycle workflow, but I can set my own domain name here, and I can use company branding logo if I have it configured. So if I set that, it will actually come from a known address, so I don't have to say it's from Microsoft.com if I, for some reason, would like to block that. And instead, it's come from my trusted domain, so users know, hey, I can trust this email address that is coming, and I don't have to worry too much about it. And that is basically what I wanted to show today. So now I'm gonna see if are there any questions or thoughts here that we can look at.
All right. Thank you very much, Robin. This is a really good demo, and I hope people online also get a taste of the lifecycle management from the Entra solution. So a couple of questions really regarding the workflow itself. One is you mentioned that we can customize the workflow,
Yes,
right? So can you elaborate a little bit more? How can we customize, and what does that mean? Like how is that kind of like related to logic apps or something like that?
absolutely. So let me go into one of my workflows here. I'm gonna take the one we just created, and so we're gonna go back to tasks, and we're gonna add, say, we have the custom task extension here, and it says here, run a custom task extension to call out an external system. So we want to see what that can do. So if I choose that, it will see you have a little orange triangle here that gives you some idea of, hey, what do I need to do that? And basically it means you need to configure something. So if I click on that, it will give me some, again, giving it a task name. So I can say run custom logic apps flow for, let's say, applications. And we know it's an external system here according to the description, but you can be even more direct and say, hey, it is for a system that is a legacy app we created, for example. Now, what the custom extension here does is you have a logic app that you have created. So logic app is basically just a workflow as well. So you have, if you've seen a flow chart, you will see the same thing with a bunch of yes/no questions, and it will continue. So in before lifecycle workflow, you could do all of this in there and spend hours and hours to make sure that it's working. Instead, you saw I set it up here in a couple of minutes. And in here, I can actually add the custom extension and the logic app flow that you have created. So you have much more possibilities to do some custom things that you in your specific organization, be it say for a specific application, or if you want to incorporate Intune or something similar to that as well. So if I actually, and as well, if I go into the execution conditions, I believe it is. I'll say this was for the other ones there, but you do have, so generally, so you have the idea of you have to create a workflow here that you can, sorry, a logic app workflow, I should specify, that you can go in and set up. So in my case, we don't have anything here. Hopefully that answered the question there.
All right, so basically means first you need to looks like you need to create some like a custom extension which is based on logic app. Then in here we can call that as a step with
Yes,
or you
sir.
build your own workflow. All right, cool. Thank you very much. The other question regarding because it's great to have this step by step kind of you can specify the sequence and the something there. Here's a question regarding the relationship between lifecycle workflows and entitlement management. Because entitlement management also specify something like your group permission, like app permission. So what's
Yes.
your suggestion? How people like use those two? Like what kind of scenario should better use entitlement management? The other is better use lifecycle workflows.
So entitlement management is based on the groups that you're having as well. So it's very much, it makes it easier to apply to guest users. So you build a large package to apply to that user specifically. Or say you make a group saying we have the application group, which includes the package group, I might call it, with entitlement management there. You put, say you have SAP, you have your Office applications, you have some VPN solutions, and then you have something, you say we have a contractor coming in. We want to make sure he has access to some parts of our environment. It could be, say, a specific Azure role he needs. You can add that. And then with the workflow, you say we want to make sure that we create a user for him or we invite him as a guest. So it's very much depending on what you're looking for. The lifecycle workflow is more for a new starter who is a long-term employee, Or if you have, in some cases, say you have a consultant that you want to make sure you're using your own identity for, so they have an identity that's tied to your organization instead of inviting them. So it depends on the scenario that you need it for.
Excellent. So basically the in title management, so you have a group, right? It's a specific group you want to apply to that and predefine some permissions or like access. But the
Correct.
lifecycle management can target for end user or group like to define the workflow. All right, cool.
Absolutely.
The other question, what's this one? So you mentioned that this is under the identity governance. Some people familiar with Azure Active Directory also know find this one identity governance can also access from Azure AD. So here you access from Entra. So can you elaborate a little bit about the relationship?
Absolutely. So when I go to Azure AD today, so aad.microsoft.com, or I believe it's aad.azure.port.com or simple, we change that a lot. So usually I use Entra.microsoft because it gives me Azure Active Directory, the permissions management, and the verified ID. Now, you saw me jumping around here in the admin center. This is quite the same as well. It's just tied specifically to the admin center itself. So I could even go to, so this is still active Azure Active Directory, and I can still go to, say, Azure Active Directory from the admin portal, and I click on that. It will ask me to log in. Now, you didn't see I have saved my password there for my demo environment here, but that is not best practice. And you can see it takes me to Entra directly. So some people might be familiar saying, if we go into AAD, so let me see, or portal.azure.com. Let me see if that is the correct one, if I remember correctly. Again, you did not see that. The simple click in here. We see we have Azure Directory. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We see we have Azure Active Directory here as well. So if I click on that, it gives me a lot more information here. So I have some stuff I can do here that I cannot do from the Entra portal. So it depends on what you're looking for as well. The Entra portal is specifically for your users, the group, the devices, and then the Azure portal has a little bit more depending on what you need here.
Well, thank you very much. So basically, it's a different user experience, but it looks like it's shared a lot of infrastructure, the functionality, and you can jump from this location to the others. It looks like there's all connected.
It's all connected. So you can say always leads to Entra in some way. Entra is new, rebranding, but it all leads to the same product. So even if you're working with Azure Active Directory in various different portals, you will all have the same configuration everywhere. Just as you saw in the M365 admin portal, I had Luke's user in there, as well as I have him in here as well. So because we didn't delete him, we still find him here, even if I would go into any other portal.
All right, cool. Yeah, so the underline is it's still using the same one. So Entra basically is, can we understand it this way? Entra is Azure AD plus the one you mentioned, what's the other you hear? So Azure AD plus the permission management plus the verified AD
Yes,
ID.
sir. So the easiest way I've seen my product team when I'm speaking to them and when they teach us about this is Microsoft Entra is identity. So everything identity related goes into Microsoft Entra.
Okay. So it's a superset of the Azure AD.
Very much so.
All right, cool. All right, I think that's pretty much all the questions we have. And so before we wrap up this demo. So this is a very helpful demo. And basically, Robin showed you the life cycle management and a couple of use cases. And before we finish, do you have any last kind of a departure suggestion to our audience, Robin? Like what's maybe the best practice to use the life cycle workflows or something like you can think about?
The best practice is to tell your HR department that we will have this in the future. They will thank you quite immensely. I have seen corporations that have not had this and had the new onboarded people sit there for a week waiting for access to come in, just because the IT department didn't fix it in time.
All right, cool. Okay, I think that's it for this noon session. So hopefully you get valuable information, and we record a session. So if you miss some part of it, you can review that later. Again, thank you very much, Robin, and thanks also everyone that joined online.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye for now.
Bye.